Good morning, and thank you all for being here today. My name is Pilar Schiavo, Assembly Member for Assembly District 40 here in Santa Clarita in the Northwest San Fernando Valley. We are here today because too many people in our community are struggling just to get by and really need our help. Right now, even affording the basics is a burden for far too many families. When a box of cereal is $8, recovering precious dollars from an unwanted $8 a month subscription can feed your kid for a week. And that's why our coalition stepped up, my office in collaboration with the Consumer Federation and consumer advocates, to really take action this legislative year. We worked hard this session to pass legislation that will put money back in the pockets of people and protect their most precious investments, their home. It's all with the same goal, making things easier for families across our community. And I suspect probably everyone here has a story of a time when you've had a subscription or an auto renewal that you were trying to cancel, either a gym membership or streaming services or online publications and computer software that you just don't use anymore and forgot to cancel, or forgot that the free trial ended, or maybe your kid signed up for an app and you forgot to cancel it. So the list is endless, and the frustration has really been growing, and those dollars can really, really add up. If you're lucky enough to find a customer service number and actually get in touch with a real person, good luck trying to negotiate a solution, navigate a phone tree, and too many times the phone call is actually dropped, forcing you to start all over again. It's not by accident. This is the system that is designed to keep consumers locked in place and paying these fees. And the cost of these plans really add up. 2022 research found that on average, 42% of consumers forgot they're still paying subscriptions that they no longer used, and customers underestimated their monthly spending and subscriptions by $133 a month, which is a chunk of change, especially today when dollars are so tight for people. That's not just a box of cereal, that's a bunch of groceries for a family, or gas in the car for that month. And that's why we are so excited to talk about our Click to Cancel bill. AB 2863 is now on the governor's desk awaiting his signature. And we believe that this bill is really going to address these frustrations, these challenges, and put more money into people's pockets. First, and most importantly, it will make it easier for customers to unsubscribe. So as easy as that one click or two clicks to sign up, you can click one time or two times to cancel your subscription. It requires that an automatic renewal is so crystal clear up front for customers that they know that they will be charged in the future. And it also makes sure that people know what they're going to be paying by providing notice for the amount or the range of costs. And so the customer knows up front what is going to be coming out of their pockets. And finally, it stops businesses from obstructing or delaying the request to cancel and still allowing a business to attempt to keep the customer if the customer is willing. So we are very hopeful that the governor will sign this bill. We believe that it's really clear that this is an important issue that's facing Californians. We know that there's been national leadership from the Biden administration to move this issue forward, and we're proud to be the first state in the nation to be moving a policy like this forward. That will really, have, again, California setting the standard for the nation and leading the way to protect our communities from unwanted costs and putting money back into the pockets of Californians. So I wanted to bring up other folks who are here to speak about this bill as well, and talk about both the legislation and advocates from the Consumer Federation of California. And so leading off is Robert Harrell, the Executive Director of the Consumer Federation.
Thank you very much, Assembly Member. Thank you all for being here. I'd also like to particularly thank those on the live stream, and remember that there is an opportunity later on for questions. I'm Robert Harrell. I'm the Executive Director of the Consumer Federation of California, and we're thrilled to be here today. Today we're going to be talking about 3 bills. First, the one that Assemblymember Schiavo just mentioned, click to cancel, call to cancel, which we think is really important. I'll speak to in a second. And then later on in this press conference, we're going to be talking a bit about foreclosure and predatory lending and people getting ripped off. And I think you're going to hear an unbelievably compelling story, one of many that we have in this area. So focusing on what we refer to as the click to cancel, call to cancel bill, today, and it's in your packet, we have sent a letter to the governor with a broad range of consumer organizations and others, including law enforcement, who you'll hear from shortly, urging the governor to sign this bill. This bill got bipartisan support in the legislature. Having said that, it was a tough slog, and I first want to thank Assemblymember Schiavo. She has very quickly, in her first term in the legislature, established herself as one of California's leaders on consumer issues. And so it's thanks to members like Assemblymember Schiavo that we can see advancement and that California can continue to lead the way. So in click to cancel, call to cancel, everyone has a story. It's happened to you, it's happened to your friends, it's happened to your family. You can't get out of something. And then our idea is that it ought to be as easy to get out of it as it was to get into it. That's not some revolutionary concept, that's basic common sense. But far too often, some companies who don't want to play by the rules, they want to make it so hard on you. It's like you're a hamster in a maze that you can never get out of. That's purposeful. That's not a bug of the system, that's a feature of the system, and it needs to stop. And this bill will go a long way. I want to note also that this bill largely mirrors the Federal Trade Commission rule that is pending right now on the same topic. And I would just note, and if I could, I'd just like to briefly read a passage. It's in the press packet as well. Just yesterday, the Federal Trade Commission sent a letter, at least, well, the head of the Federal Trade Commission's Director of Bureau of Consumer Protection, Sam Levine, sent a letter to Governor Newsom about this topic. And I'm going to quote briefly from that letter and use a few examples. When we're talking about click to cancel and these automatic subscriptions, quote, far too often companies manipulate consumers into making recurrent payments for goods that the consumers never intended to purchase or did not want to continue buying. Over the years, deceptive and unfair negative option practices, such as failing to make adequate disclosures, billing consumers without their consent, or making cancellation difficult or imposing, have been a persistent source of consumer harm. And the letter goes on to talk about just a handful of the many cases that we know are out there. The Federal Trade Commission just recently sued Adobe. I urge you to take a look at that filing, the allegations made in that case. Adobe purposely created a system so complicated that it was almost impossible for anyone to cancel or get out of their subscription. When you call especially, it's well known within the industry, they call it the Iliad. When you have initiated the call to cancel, and then what they try to do is keep you on the phone for as long as possible. Again, purposefully. People in many of these companies who are responding to those calls are paid based on their ability to keep you from canceling, even though you called purposely to cancel. This is not made up. This is happening all the time. And there's many other cases that the DAs have worked on that Mr. Papageorge can speak to. Unfortunately, many of them, the objective is to change that behavior. So we can't say some of those numbers, but the names of those companies. But we can talk about Adobe and FloatMe and Amazon with Amazon Prime, people getting signed on for Amazon Prime that had no intention of doing that. So this is a persistent and pernicious problem. We are cautiously optimistic that the governor will sign this bill with bipartisan support. And again, I want to thank the whole coalition, law enforcement, and especially Assemblymember Schiavo for her strong leadership on this really important consumer issue. One last thing, I'll anticipate a potential question that usually comes is, well, if the Federal Trade Commission is working on this, why do we need a California law? The short answer is, every time the Biden-Harris administration has come up with strong pro-consumer rules, they have immediately been challenged in court What happens is the companies or industries that oppose any rule, they race to the Fifth Circuit and federal court in Texas. They find a particular judge, it's called forum shopping, and they get that judge to say, well, let's wait on this. And we anticipate, though we never know, that this would be no different than all those other rules that are being tied up in red tape. And so California can't afford to wait for the federal government to act and then have that be legally challenged. We're going to take matters into our own hands and continue to lead the country. With that, I'll hand it back to Assemblymember, and thank you again.
Thank you, Robert. So next up, we wanted to hear from Tom Papageorge, who is the Deputy District Attorney for Consumer Protection at San Diego County. He also worked as the in the LA District Attorney Office doing this work as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Con. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us in celebrating, at least preliminarily, 3 very good consumer causes. I'm Tom Papageorge. I was, in fact, the head of the LADA Consumer Protection Division for 20-plus years. I now wear that same hat in my hometown of San Diego as head of the Consumer Unit in the San Diego DA's office. I'm also one of the founders of the California Auto Renewal Task Force, CART for short, because all government agencies have to have acronyms and nicknames. CART is a group of 6 district attorneys, including LA and San Diego, throughout California, who for the past 9 years have banded together to try to enforce the then new California Auto Renewal Statute, which is part of our Business and Professions Code. We have obtained more than 20 permanent injunctions against major businesses, and since these are filed in public cases, I can tell you that they are names you recognize daily: Match.com, Classmates.com, Wine Direct, and a number of others. And I do want to stress that they agreed to settle their cases without admissions of liability, but the scope of the problem is very clear. And we are here today, representing my colleagues in the law enforcement community, to preliminarily congratulate and thank Assemblymember Schiavo and Robert Harrell and the Consumer Federation of California, because what they've done in AB 2863 is give us another tool to protect the millions of Californians who are victims of this problem. You've already heard a description of it, ably covered by both the Assembly member and Robert. But let me add that this problem isn't trivial, isn't anecdotal. It's one of the top 5 consumer complaints received by DAs across the state and by the Federal Trade Commission. Millions of Californians, let's face it, most of the people in this room, go ahead and raise your hand, do not read your credit card statement with great precision looking for that $9.95 charge. After all, my wife tells me what I have to buy and sell, and she buys things and I buy things, and we don't always know what our colleagues, family members, or others have done. Spotting this problem is problem number 1, and then, as Robert ably explained, correcting the problem requires the patience of a saint, or perhaps requires a miracle. Most California businesses are honest, and I want to stress this, and we're here partly to protect honest businesses and create a level playing field for those businesses who are cheating. A handful of California businesses, however, elect to use the shortcut of signing you up when you only wanted to buy it once and making it essentially impossible to cancel. This law, if signed by Governor Newsom, will permit efficient and effective cancellation while balancing the legitimate business interest of presenting an option of continuing if the consumer consents and wants to continue to use the product or service. This is a crucial new protection for California consumers. Millions of Californians are being charged this every month. Tens of millions of dollars each year are taken unknowingly from consumers just like you and me. The important additional note I want to make from the law enforcement perspective is we need clarity on what are the obligations for honest businesses trying to comply, so that we can select those businesses who are cutting corners, prosecute them, and create that level playing field where honest businesses are all playing by the same rules and helping bring goods and services to the marketplace that consumers actually want. This bill provides clarity on consent, on notices, on ease of cancellation, so that our auto renewal task force will be able to enforce these laws more effectively against the handful of California businesses that choose to cut these corners. This is making California state-of-the-art in consumer protection in this top 5 area of consumer problems in California. The California Auto Renewal Task Force, of which I'm a member, the California Consumer Protection Community, wanted me to come here today to bring a special message of thanks to Robert Harrell and the Consumer Federation of California, the sponsor, but in particular to Assembly Member Schiavo, who has, in a very short period of time, become a dynamic leader in improving California's consumer protection laws and giving us, as prosecutors, the tools to do that. So if we get some wet ink on this bill very soon, and we're confident we will, all 39 million California consumers will be better off as a result of Assemblymember Schiavo's efforts. So we thank you, Pilar, for this important step in the battle against consumer fraud and deception. Thank you very much, and I believe we'll answer questions after the presentation, if you have any.
Thank you so much, Tom and Robert. Just to put a kind of to end on this note, just to explain how widespread and what a huge issue this really is. There is actually, a company out there that you can sign up with that will help cancel subscriptions for you. You can pay someone to cancel your subscriptions that you are paying for. And my bank, actually, my credit card just started a feature where it shows me the upcoming charges that are coming, and it has a cancellation button, which unfortunately didn't work for the one I tried to cancel. But, work in progress. But that's how widespread this is that, actually companies are getting into the business of helping people cancel because it's been so difficult for people to do it on their own. So next, I am very excited to talk about another bill that also is really going to protect people in our community. And it's AB 2424 that will really help protect people's most precious and biggest investment, their home. California's existing foreclosure process in too many instances is grossly unfair, and AB 2424 will protect against unfair foreclosures. As a state, we are trying to support and lift up those who are struggling the most, but our current process means that homeowners, especially in low-income communities, are losing out on literally billions of dollars in wealth. So here's how it works now. When someone can't pay their mortgage, the bank lender is allowed to sell the property at auction. The bank then takes back the loan's remaining balance, and the homeowner receives any surplus funds, but there rarely are any. Under this process, the homeowners often lose tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in home equity because of this auction process. And at the same time, banks and wealthy investors and corporations are the ones who are benefiting from these below market auction rates. We all know how expensive housing is, and so for houses to be sold underneath people who have been paying on them for years and sometimes decades, and then fall on hard times, it's heartbreaking to hear these stories. And I know we have a very powerful and heartbreaking story today that will be shared. Foreclosed homeowners are often the most vulnerable among us, low-income families, seniors, people with disabilities. Frequently, the home is their only asset. And after, like I said, paying for decades, the equity that they've built up in their home is their life savings. And it's the thing that will prevent them from ending up in homelessness. So taking these critical dollars away from folks puts families who once had stable housing at risk of homelessness and stands in the way of a stable future. We are tackling this problem head on with our legislation, AB 2424, which is also on the governor's desk awaiting signature. And it requires lenders to postpone foreclosure of a sale if the homeowner can provide the lender or the bank with a listing agreement that they're already trying to sell their home, and allowing the homeowner the opportunity to get the maximum value for their home and sell their property while ensuring that the lender is also made whole. It would also set a minimum bid requirement for the first attempt on a foreclosure at auction, so that the secured property would not be sold below a certain threshold. And this process will allow the homeowner the opportunity to recover more of their equity. AB 2424 seeks a balance between the equity, and so both the bank and the owner who's been investing their hard-earned dollars in the value are able to get their fair share of this interest in the value of their home, protecting the equity for the people of our community who need it most. With me today are advocates still from the Consumer Federation of California. And so first I'll bring Robert Harrell back up here to talk about AB 2424.
Thanks again. We're particularly pleased to see this bill go to the governor. Again, in your packet is a letter signed by 12 leading consumer organizations throughout the state urging the governor to sign this bill. Our foreclosure process in California is what's known as a non-judicial foreclosure process. And what we've seen far too often is homeowners and their families stripped of the equity that has been built up over years and decades. This is far too often their only significant asset. This is their nest egg. And this is also, I should point out, how, particularly in communities of color, wealth gets distributed to the next generation. And it has not worked nearly as well as it does in white communities, and the data strongly backs that up. So you're looking at a universe of disproportionately people of color living in communities of color. This is their only asset. In many cases, they've paid for years and decades. So we want to thank profoundly Assemblymember Schiavo. CFC's been working on this issue for a number of years. We had a proposal almost get to the governor, but the banks and the mortgage lenders killed it. And so this year we just keep trying, right? Persistence is one of our hallmarks. We keep trying. And so we made some adjustments to the proposal, and now we have something strong that has received, again, bipartisan support. This partisan distinction on issues like this, when people are being pulled out of their homes and they and their families are not getting the equity gains that they've paid for decades, is not right, and it is not fair. I also want to note, importantly, there's another kind of partner bill to this in our foreclosure efforts, and that's AB 3108 by Assemblymember Reginald Jones-Sawyer, whose district is down in LA. He was unable to make it here up to Santa Clarita today, but we want to send a profound thanks to him. That bill focuses on clarifying the rules on predatory and fraudulent lending so that law enforcement, like the DAs that Mr. Papageorge and his colleagues represent, can get at more of those cases. Far too many, sadly, DAs are not taking those cases, even when it's painfully obvious that the law is being violated and people are being ripped off. And for every county like the ones that Mr. Papageorge and some of his closer colleagues work on that really focus on consumer protection, there are other counties that we think can do more, and that bill will help them do more. So we want to thank Assemblymember Jones-Sawyer for that bill, and I believe the DA's Association is in support of that measure as well. So with that, I think you're about to hear a story that cannot be made up. And Mr. Vossler, who's going to speak in a moment, has a number of clients, of which if reporters or others are interested, we can help you put in touch with beyond what the story you're going to hear today, with just absolutely heart-wrenching stories that you would think only would show up in a movie, but they're real. And these are people who are losing everything and they're getting taken advantage of. So with that, I'll hand it back to Assemblymember Schiavo so that we can set up this painful story to show why it's so important to get these predatory lending and foreclosure reform bills signed into law.
So next, before we hear that story, I want to invite Syl Vossler up, who has represented a number of clients with his law group and throughout his career, to share a little bit about why this issue is so important as well.
Hi, my name is Syl Vossler. I'm a consumer attorney, and I exclusively represent victims of predatory lending and wrongful foreclosure. These issues primarily affect the subprime market and our most vulnerable communities. the Black community, immigrant communities, the elderly, and the disabled. Foreclosures and predatory loans are a driving cause of the racial wealth gap. And a foreclosure or predatory loan can wipe out a victim's entire life savings in home equity. This was true for one of my clients in San Francisco, who at 77 years old, as an immigrant widow who was retired with a dependent adult daughter, had her San Francisco home sold for $50,000 by her lender after she made payments on time for 20 years. Her San Francisco home was worth $800,000. So at the time she lost her home in foreclosure, she lost her home and $750,000 in equity that she had saved up, her life savings. They gave her a penny after the sale. The same was true for a client of mine in Oakland, who at 86 years old, after a career working at the post office, she had built up a life savings of a home and rental property and over $1 million in equity. Her two properties were worth $1.6 million, and her lender sold her homes, both of them in the same auction, for $205,000. So at the time she loses her home, at the time she needs her life savings the most, it's all gone. And like so many people in Oakland, she was very close to pushing all of her belongings down the street in a shopping cart at 86 years old. After doing the right thing, making her payments for 40-something years. And you're going to hear a story of my most recent client. They have a heartbreaking story that I'll let them say in their own words. And it is the worst loan I've ever seen in my practice of law. I've seen so many heartbreaking stories of people having their life savings taken from them, people in the most vulnerable communities in California. And I'm so grateful to Assemblymember Schiavo for her leadership on AB 2424, and same to Assemblymember Joan Sawyer for his leadership on AB 3108. And I really, I think it's going to be a wonderful thing for consumers in California when those bills pass. With that said, I'll pass it back to. I'm going to introduce Mr. Farzad Rad, who is the financial agent for his mother, Ms. Farida Rad, who is a predatory lending victim who, her story is absolutely heartbreaking, and I'm going to allow Farzad to share her story.
Thank you, Sil, and I'm very happy to be here to support this bill. My name is Farzad Rad. I'm here to speak on behalf of my mom, Farida. My mom is 79 years old. She is a widow. She's an immigrant from Iran. She speaks very limited English and has been diagnosed with dementia. After my dad died in 2016, my mom began to struggle financially. She fell behind on her mortgage and was contacted by a loan broker who promised to help her save her home. That broker scammed my mom into taking a predatory loan, which charged her hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees and interest. It required her to pay a $1.4 million balloon payment after 1 year. My mom's income at the time was approximately $20,000 a year in Social Security. After my mom couldn't pay the balloon payment, they increased her interest rate to 25% and charged her hundreds of thousands of dollars more in interest and fees. And then they foreclosed her home and took it away. She lost her home and her entire life savings in home equity, close to about $1 million. They took everything from her, and the sheriffs showed up this month to kick her out of her home. The legislature needs to take action to protect homeowners like my mom from having their homes and their life savings in equity taken from them. We are here to publicly support AB 2424 and AB 3108, and I thank Assemblymember Schiavo and Assemblyman Joan Sawyer for their leadership in bringing these important bills forward. Thank you so much. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Farzad, and to your mom for being here. How can you imagine $1 million payment in a year for someone who is living off $20,000 in Social Security. It's unconscionable, and it's exactly why we felt like we needed to take action. We are hopeful the governor will sign this bill. Clearly, there is a desperate need to take action here to make sure that people are forced to play by decent rules, just a simple rule of decency, that people who have invested in their homes, who have made the payments and then fall on hard times should be able to get back some of that investment. And that's simply what AB 2424 does at the end of the day. So we're grateful to everyone for being here today. Happy to take some questions if people have it. All good. We explained a lot of things. Maybe we covered it all.
Are there any
Well,
questions online? To your
Online
knowledge?
questions? Are there any in chats?
No?
And I just want to, again, thank everyone here for their advocacy. They have been carrying this mantle before I came along, and I'm really grateful that we were able to push it over the finish line, hopefully the extra finish line of getting it signed by the governor. I also want to say a big thank you to my staff and chief, Hugh Bauer, who worked very, very hard on this bill. And without him, I don't think we would be here today, too. So very grateful to everyone who's been a part of this to make sure that we really are protecting Californians pocketbooks, and making this a fair, more just state for everyone who lives here. So thank you very much. Thank you, guys.